It was 2023 when I visited the United States for the first time. I was working on a documentary project in Philadelphia, focusing on America's most haunted places. And the place that changed my life forever was none other than the Eastern State Penitentiary. This prison was built in the 1800s, a place designed to completely isolate its inmates. No light, no human interaction, just walls, silence, and what the locals call screams that talk to themselves. When I got there, the sun had already set, the cold was bone deep, and the whole building smelled damp like death clinging to stone. I wasn't alone. I had a cameraman with me, Jaden, but to be honest, the moment we stepped inside, it didn't feel like we were alone at all. We were in corridor number 8. I had an infrared camera, and Jaden was running the voice recorder. Suddenly, we heard footsteps behind a locked cell door. I asked out loud, "Is anyone there?" No answer. But the footsteps didn't stop. And then, the door started shaking. Jaden's eyes widened in fear. But we told ourselves, maybe it was just the old building shifting. We were wrong. We decided to return the next night. This time, I'd go in completely alone. Jaden stayed in the van outside. That was the biggest mistake of my life. I was in cell block 4 when my recorder picked up someone crying, a soft, desperate voice. "Let me out. Please, please." A chill raced down my spine. There was something that looked like blood smeared across the wall. And then, the camera captured it. A shadow, in an old prison uniform, standing perfectly still, staring right at me. I turned to run, but I froze. It felt like something grabbed my shoulder. A cold hand. The fingers were icy, like they weren't even alive. And when I turned around, there was nothing there. Then the doors slammed shut. The lights died. And suddenly, a wave of cries, like hundreds of people sobbing all at once, filled the air. And then, blackness. I passed out. Jaden found me lying on the floor the next morning. I had scratches on my hands, but the prison record showed no one had entered during the night. When we played back the audio, a voice, cold and clear, whispered, "We're not free yet." I left that project. I left America. But even now, when I'm alone at night, that voice, those screams, that shadow, they still come back. My name is Elijah Miller, and what happened to me in the winter of 2019 was not fiction, not a dream. It was a night that never really left me, not even after I did. I've spent years researching America's most haunted places. So when I learned about Colorado's legendary Stanley Hotel, the same place that inspired Stephen King's The Shining, I knew I had to experience it for myself. I booked a room online, and somehow I got room 217, the most notorious one of all. The entire building was buried in snow, silent, timeless. The old wooden frames on the walls, the creaking stairs, the air itself. It felt like stepping into a forgotten film. The woman at the front desk gave me a strange look as she handed over the key. "You really booked room 217? I smiled. "Yes, that's exactly what I came for." She had me sign the waiver, then handed me the key, the old-fashioned kind, brass and cold. As I stepped into the elevator, I felt something, a shiver down my spine. There was a mirror on the elevator wall, and I swear I saw someone standing behind me. But when I turned, there was no one. As soon as I opened the door, a cold gust welcomed me. Everything inside was neat. A classic wooden bed, vintage lamps, antique furniture. But there was a silence, a dense kind. Not peace, but stillness, like the room had been holding its breath for a century. At 1:17 a.m., I heard something. Dripping water, coming from the bathroom. Confused, I checked the faucet. It was shut tight, but the floor was wet. I had brought my infrared night vision camera just in case. I placed it facing the bed and let it roll. Everything was silent for a while, until just past 3 a.m. The door creaked open very slowly. I didn't move. I was lying on the bed, eyes wide open. And then, in the green night vision glow, a woman appeared. She stood at the door in a long white dress. She didn't move for a while. Then she stepped forward, closer to the bed. I turned my head, nothing there. But in the morning when I watched the footage, she was there. Clearly, a white figure, blurred face, leaning over my sleeping body. staring at my face. I screamed, even though it was a recording. The next morning, when the staff saw me, pale, shaken, an older maintenance guy pulled me aside. "Room 217 is never truly empty," he said. "In 1911, a maid died in that very room. She's been watching the guests ever since. Stephen King stayed there too, and the next day, he started writing The Shining." I checked out that same night, but as I stepped into the elevator one last time, in the mirror, she was standing behind me again, smiling. Today, room 217 might look like just another room, but if you're ever awake at 3 a.m., don't be surprised if someone is quietly breathing over your face, just to see if you're still alive. I never believed in the paranormal. Not really. I was a skeptic, always the one to laugh off ghost stories and haunted rumors. But one cold night in 2019 changed all of that forever. That was the night I stayed, alone, in one of England's most haunted homes, the ancient Ram Inn. It was located in a quiet, forgotten village in Gloucestershire, an old building from the 1100s, shrouded in ivy and rot. I was part of a small paranormal research group, but due to a last-minute delay, the rest of the team couldn't arrive until the next morning. I saw it as an opportunity, maybe even a challenge, to prove to myself that fear is just a reaction, nothing more. I was wrong. As I stepped inside, an overwhelming stench hit me. Damp wood, mold, and something else. Blood. Yes, I know what blood smells like. My flashlight illuminated ancient crucifixes hanging crookedly from stone walls. Weird markings were scratched into the floorboards, sigils I couldn't recognize. One room in particular felt wrong. The moment I crossed the threshold, I heard the door shut behind me. But I was alone. I spun around. No one there. The temperature plummeted. I could see my breath. And then, silence. I turned on my camera. The red light blinked on. "If there's anyone here," I said, voice trembling slightly, "give me a sign." Nothing. Then my camera died, fully charged, and it just shut off. Seconds later, the windows began rattling, as if someone from the inside was slamming on them. I froze. Then a child's voice, a whisper, "Don't look me in the eyes." My heart stopped. I turned and saw blood smeared on the wall behind me. 3 words, written in dripping red, "He never left." Opposite a door I hadn't noticed before began to creak open, slowly. Behind it, a staircase spiraled down, into darkness. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but something else pulled me forward. Curiosity? Stubbornness? Something else entirely. I took the first step, then the next. The basement was freezing, the air thick like syrup. Moisture bled from the walls. The ceiling dripped like a cave. Then I saw it. A shadow moved past the far wall, human-shaped, but the way it moved, like it was floating through water. I reached into my coat and pulled out a small bottle of holy water, not because I believed in it, but because I was desperate. I flung it toward the shadow. It screamed. Not a sound you can describe, but something you feel in your bones. The basement exploded in brightness. My camera blinked back to life. Everything began to rewind. Literally. I saw things reset. The dripping stopped. The walls dried. But what happened next still haunts me. I ran back upstairs, but froze in horror. The room hadn't changed, but time had. The clock wasn't ticking. No sound, no wind, no breath, just stillness. And then, a laugh. A soft giggle echoing from every direction. "You're part of us now." I shut my eyes. And when I opened them, it was morning. The team's van had just pulled into the gravel driveway. I stumbled outside, gasping for breath. My camera was recording, but when we checked the footage, it was blank. No recordings, no voices, no proof. Except one thing. Burned into the side of my neck as if traced by a hot fingertip was the symbol of a cross. To this day, I don't know what really happened that night, but I can't escape it. Every time I sleep, I dream of that room, of that stairway, of the shadow that moved like water, and always, the same whisper, "You're trapped in time now, Luke." This story isn't about jump scares. It's about dread, about how something ancient can make time forget you. It all happened on a cold autumn evening when I, along with my two friends, Eric and Jason, decided to make a documentary based on an old urban legend surrounding one of the most infamous abandoned cemeteries in America, Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. Locals call it the place where time gets cut off, a graveyard where clocks die, winds fall silent, and echoes seem afraid to return. It was around sunset when we arrived. Dry leaves crackled beneath our feet. The trees stood still as if holding their breath. As we crossed through the rusted old gate, a strange pressure filled the air. It wasn't heavy like humidity. It was quiet, oppressive, like walking into a room just after a funeral. I turned on my camera and narrated, "This is the place many believe. Time simply stops." Jason laughed nervously, "And we're the idiots trying to measure it." We walked along the crumbled stone path when Eric suddenly froze. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. We all stood still. Somewhere in the distance, barely audible, a woman was weeping. Soft, broken, like mourning that never ended. We followed the sound, winding through toppled gravestones, until we reached a crooked, decaying tomb. There was no name on the headstone, only an old broken cross, leaning sideways like it too had given up. Jason knelt down and reached to touch the stone. The moment his fingers touched it, he snatched his hand back. "It's hot," he gasped, like someone grabbed it, from inside also. We stared at him, and that's when everything changed. The wind stopped, the trees didn't move, the air went still, too still. Eric looked at his smartwatch, dead, fully charged 30 minutes ago. My phone, black screen. Jason's, same. Then we looked around and realized something terrifying. We were stuck. Every direction we ran, every turn we took, we ended up right back at the same grave, same broken cross, same patch of dark soil. Jason screamed, "We're not allowed to leave." Barrett, that's when we saw him, a figure sitting beneath a lifeless old tree, bent over, wearing a long faded coat, skin pale, face hidden. He didn't look at us, he just said one thing in a cold, flat voice. "Time that enters here never leaves." My knees felt weak, my throat dried up. I shut my eyes and began to pray. I don't know how long we stood like that, but suddenly it felt like something shoved us. Hard. The next thing we knew, we were outside the cemetery gates. All three of us, on the ground, shivering. We checked our phones, 9:13 p.m., the exact time we entered the graveyard. But when I looked at the real-time clock in the car, it was 3:07 a.m. Nearly 6 hours had passed, yet our devices still showed the moment we walked in. We turned on the camera. No video, no voices, just one audio file, a few seconds long. Jason hit play, and there it was again, a woman's weeping, faint, deep, and dangerously. My name is David, and what I'm about to share might sound unbelievable to some. But I swear on everything I hold dear, this is a chapter of my life that I can never forget. I'm a photographer based in Los Angeles, and in 2019 I was offered a project by a travel magazine. The theme was Haunted America. They told me I'd be spending 3 nights aboard the Queen Mary ship, taking photos and documenting its allegedly haunted atmosphere. Now, the Queen Mary is a retired luxury cruise ship permanently docked in Long Beach, California, and converted into a hotel. During World War II, it served as a military transport vessel, and many people are said to have died on board. Some say their spirits never left. My room for the stay was B340, known by many as the most haunted cabin on the ship. Even before I got there, 2 different staff members had asked me, "Are you sure you're okay staying in that room?" I just laughed and replied, "Fear only exists in photos." I was wrong, so wrong. Around 1 a.m., I started hearing odd noises, like someone walking in the hallway, doors creaking open and shut, but every time I looked, the corridor was empty. I grabbed my camera and stepped outside. The lights were dim, the air was still, yet I could feel cold, unnaturally cold. At the end of the corridor, I saw a shadow. It looked like a woman, wearing what seemed like a vintage dress. She was just standing there, perfectly still. I called out, "Hello?" She didn't move. I lifted my camera to take a shot, but the camera was dead. And then I turned around. She was right behind me. Just for a second, then gone. The next morning, I asked one of the older staff members if people had experienced similar things. He looked at me quietly, then said, "So, you saw her? That's Nora. She once stayed in room B340. She never checked out." That night, something even worse happened. I was lying in bed when I felt the weight, like someone was standing near my head. I opened my eyes and saw a faint, smoky figure, mumbling something, like a prayer. A whisper echoed in my ears. "Go. This is not your place." I could hardly breathe. I switched the lights on, and the figure vanished. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. On the third morning, as I was checking out, a woman, possibly another guest or maybe not, approached me quietly. She looked at me and said, "You're lucky. She only looked at you and let you go." Confused, I asked, "Who?" She gave me a strange little smile and replied, "The spirits here, they don't let everyone leave." I never shared the photos I took because what I captured didn't feel like just images. There was something else in them, a coldness, a silence that screamed, and a fear that still clings to me, even now years later. I was born and raised in London. Last year, something happened to me. Something so real, so terrifying, that even now, the memory sends chills down my spine. I work as a paranormal researcher. My job is to investigate old places believed to be haunted, document strange phenomena, and try to make sense of the unknown. I've visited dozens of supposedly haunted locations across Europe, but the Tower of London, that place was something else entirely. A structure soaked in centuries of death, imprisonment, torture, and execution. Thousands imprisoned, many beheaded, and all of it, every scream, every drop of blood, still clings to those walls. It was around 11 p.m. when I entered the tower. I had received special permission to conduct an overnight investigation, part of a BBC documentary series. I was alone. Just me, 2 cameras, one mounted to my chest and another handheld. The lighting was barely enough to see my own feet. My first stop was the exact site where Anne Boleyn was executed, the ill-fated wife of King Henry VIII, who was beheaded under false accusations of adultery. People say her spirit still wanders the tower, without her head. As I stood silently at the spot, I heard something, a soft whisper, like a woman, crying. I turned my camera. Nothing. Then again, the sobbing, closer this time. I moved toward the sound, my heart pounding. I hit record and spoke. "If someone's here, make a sound." Suddenly, a piercing scream, as if someone was being tortured. It was right next to my ear. I nearly dropped the camera. I was shaking. I decided to head into the lower dungeons, the place where prisoners were kept in chains, starved, beaten. As I descended the stairs, I was hit by a horrible stench. Dampness, dried blood, something ancient. I peeked into one of the empty cells, and suddenly, I was shoved. I fell forward onto the ground. I turned around, no one. I tried to close the cell door behind me, but it had already closed, by itself. I yelled, "Let me out!" But my voice only echoed back at me. Then I saw him, a figure wearing old, torn clothing, eyes glowing deep red, just standing there, watching me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I thought, "This is it. I'm going to die here." Then I felt something, a hand, soft but firm, on my shoulder. I spun around. No one was there, the door now wide open. I ran, dropped the camera, never looked back. When I reached the exit, a security guard saw the look on my face and called for an ambulance. Later, I showed them the footage, and everyone who saw it went pale. In one clip, you can clearly see a headless woman sitting at the staircase, and that man with the red eyes. After research, we matched. My My name is Daniel, and I'm a documentary filmmaker. My goal is to travel the world exploring the darkest and most haunted historical sites on Earth. But what happened to me inside Leap Castle wasn't just history. It was terror, and it still lives inside me to this day. It started when I was offered a private assignment from the Irish government. They wanted a deep dive documentary on the infamous Leap Castle, known for its bloody history, secret chambers, and paranormal legends. I went there with my cameraman, Thomas. It was broad daylight when we arrived, and everything seemed normal. But the moment we stepped through the gates, the air changed. Thick, heavy, and eerily quiet. It was like the walls were breathing. Our main focus was the castle's most terrifying location, the Bloody Chapel. Thomas laughed as we climbed the narrow staircase. "Maybe we'll see the ghost priest tonight," he joked. I laughed too, but deep down, I felt something watching us. The moment we entered the chapel, the temperature dropped, fast. It felt like we had stepped into a walk-in freezer. I was adjusting the focus on the camera when Thomas froze. "Dan, did you hear that?" "Hear what?" I asked. "Someone whispered my name." We stopped. Total silence. Only the sound of our breathing echoed through the stone chamber. Suddenly, slam! The chapel door slammed shut on its own. Thomas ran to it, tried to open it. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. It felt like we were locked in from the outside. And then came the smell, a horrible stench, like burnt flesh mixed with mold and old bones. Thomas turned pale. "It's the elemental," he whispered. "They say it shows up with that smell." We looked toward the far wall and saw it, a shadow seeping out from the stone like smoke. It was humanoid, barely visible, but its eyes were glowing. Not red, but white-hot, like burning embers. My hands were shaking, but I didn't stop filming. The shadow slowly advanced. With each step, it whispered something. In ancient Irish, it sounded like curses. Thomas panicked. "Dan, we need to pray. Say something, anything." I closed my eyes and without thinking, began reciting a prayer, something I remembered from childhood, a verse for protection. The shadow stopped. For a few seconds, everything was still. Then suddenly, a blinding white flash, and we blacked out. We woke up outside the chapel. The door was wide open. There were no injuries, no bruises, but we remembered everything. We grabbed our gear and left without looking back. Later that night, I reviewed the footage. The camera had captured the shadow, its glowing eyes clearly visible. But there was something else, a voice, a sentence, repeated over and over in a deep, guttural tone. "You don't belong here. Leave or stay forever." I never published the video. My name is Kevin, and I'm from a small, quiet village in Louisiana. I spent most of my life thinking ghost stories were just that, stories, until I visited a place where the line between myth and truth simply disappeared. It all began in 2022 when I decided to visit Myrtle's Plantation, a site that's been called one of the most haunted homes in America. It was built in 1796, and over a dozen spirits are said to dwell within its walls. The legacy of slavery, death, and deep-rooted trauma stains the very foundation of that house. I went there for a university project titled Historic Haunted Sites of the South. When I first arrived at the plantation gates, the sun had just set. A weathered wooden sign creaked in the breeze, and just beyond the iron bars, I felt the presence of something dark, like a shadow watching me. I told myself it was just nerves. At the reception, an old woman was giving a tour. When she looked up and saw me, her expression changed. For a second, fear flashed in her eyes. She whispered, "If you plan on spending the night, just remember one thing. Don't look into her eyes, the one who stands behind the trees." I chuckled nervously. She didn't laugh back. I was given room 4, the room where, legend says, a woman named Chloe, an enslaved servant, had once been held against her will. Some say she was killed after poisoning her master's children. Others say she was wrongly accused, punished, and silenced. That night, as I was writing notes for my report, the window creaked open on its own. The wind moved the ancient trees outside, and through the leaves, I heard it. A woman softly sobbing. I rushed to the window, but no one was there. I closed it and tried to sleep. Maybe around 2:47 a.m., I woke up. With the feeling that someone was standing at the foot of the bed, I opened my eyes, and I saw her. She stood silently, wearing old, torn clothing from a different century. Her face was partially blackened, like it had rotted or been burned. Her eyes were completely white, no pupils, no life. She hovered just a few inches above the floor. I couldn't move. It was like my body had frozen. She glided forward, no footsteps, just a steady, terrifying approach. Then, she leaned in close to my ear and whispered, "The pain buried in this land never dies." When I woke up the next morning, I felt an intense burning on my throat. I ran to the mirror and saw them. Fingernail marks, deep, red scratches, like something had grabbed me by the neck. I showed them to the staff. They just stared and finally said, "You're lucky. Some hear voices, some see her, some never come back at all." I left that place the same day. I submitted my report, got an A, but I never slept the same again. Even now, when the wind moves through the trees outside my house, I pause, because sometimes it feels like someone is still watching me from behind the trees. My name is Cassian, a history student from a small town near Venice, Italy. For years, I've been collecting horror folklore and legends from historical sites. But there was one place people refused to even speak of, Poveglia Island. Once used to isolate victims of the Black Plague, then later turned into a mental asylum. The island was known for horrific experiments, death, and endless suffering. They say no one who stays overnight ever comes back alive. That was all I needed to hear. I decided to go there myself. On a warm June morning, I boarded a small boat and headed toward Poveglia. The water was still silent. The only sound was the soft hum of the engine. As I neared the island, its crumbling buildings, dead trees, and that abandoned bell tower began to appear like ghosts from the fog. Time, it seemed, had completely stopped there. I stepped onto the island with my camera and notebook in hand. The ground beneath me felt wrong, like the soil itself groaned under my feet. Inside the first structure, a heavy, suffocating feeling set in. The air didn't move, as if even the wind was afraid. I turned on my GPS tracker and began filming each room. Suddenly, from behind a door, I heard the faint crying of a woman. I froze. The sobbing continued softly. I opened the door. No one. Just a broken chair, an old mattress, and deep scratch marks etched into the walls. By afternoon, I made it to the asylum's main hall. Dust floated in the thin light filtering through broken windows. Inside a rusted file cabinet, I found patient records, old, yellowed files, some covered in mold and dried blood. One file read, "Subject 23 claims she sees people hanging from the trees at night. Prescribed isolation and shock therapy." I shut the file slowly. From the corner of my eye, a shadow moved. I spun around. Nothing. Just a chill in the room, and all the windows were shut. As evening approached, the island's air turned heavier, as if the place itself wanted to sink into the sea. I made my way to the infamous bell tower, a place locals say is cursed. They warned of screams coming from it at night. I turned on my voice recorder and climbed slowly. Step by step, the silence below grew deeper, darker. Halfway up, I heard something. A child's laughter, faint, but chilling. I turned around. Nothing. When I reached the top, I saw the rusted bell, broken chains, and words carved into the wall. "Loro non se ne sono mai andati." They never left. Suddenly, my camera shut off. The battery was full moments ago. My recorder too made a shrill scream, then died. I panicked. Started running down the stairs, but the stairs, they felt longer than before. Endless. The wind howled. Something moved below me. I don't know how, but I made it down. I sprinted toward the shore, but my boat was gone, untied, floating far into the lagoon. I was trapped. Darkness fell. Only the dim glow of the moon lit the decaying ruins behind me. The island now was wide awake. In that silence, I heard them, weeping, screaming, laughter. I sat by the edge of the water, tried to close my eyes, but every time I did, I saw faces. Eyes bleeding, shadows crawling, bodies swinging from the trees. At dawn, I spotted a fishing boat nearby. I waved like a madman. The fisherman slowed, shocked. As I climbed aboard, he stared at me. "You survived the night? No one ever comes back from there." I didn't answer. I still don't have one. But this much is true. The island calls, and when it does, it doesn't always let go. Even now when I try to sleep, that laughter, that voice, that shadow, is still with me. I'm from Pakistan, but for the past 2 years, I've been living in a quiet little town in Japan. Life there was slow and peaceful. I worked as an English teacher at a local school, and my modest apartment was just a few kilometers from Aokigahara, the infamous suicide forest. The first time I heard the name, I laughed. I assumed it was just another Western media exaggeration. But then one day, a senior teacher at my school, Mr. Suzuki, looked at me and said, "If you ever go into Aokigahara, take a rope with you, so you can tie it to something and find your way back. Most people don't." He wasn't joking, and something inside me shifted that day. It was a freezing March morning when I finally decided to go. I took the day off and planned to explore just the edges of the forest, nothing too deep. I packed my DSLR, a small lunchbox, and a power bank. The road was calm, but just before entering, a sign stopped me in my tracks. "Please reconsider. Your life is precious. There is always hope." It shook me, but I didn't turn back. Inside, the first thing I noticed was the silence. No birds, no wind, no rustling leaves, just a deep, heavy stillness, like the forest was holding its breath. A few steps in, I saw a frayed rope tied to a tree, vanishing into the dense woods. Maybe someone used it to mark their way out, but just as I stared at it, I heard something. A whisper, "Tasukete, help me." The soft Japanese voice made my blood run cold. I turned on my camera and followed the sound, but as I stepped forward, my foot snapped a branch and I fell to the ground. When I stood up, everything had changed. The sunlight had vanished. I looked at my watch, 1 p.m., but it felt like 10 at night. I turned to retrace my steps, but the rope was gone. The very one tied to the tree just moments ago. I checked my camera. The footage was corrupted, just static and muffled noises, and faint screams like wind-carrying voices. Then, I saw her. A woman in a white gown, her hair covering her face, standing between the trees. She stared at me without blinking. Her eyes were black voids, empty, soulless. I stumbled back, heart pounding. Then I heard footsteps, fast, behind me. I spun around. Nothing. When I looked back toward the woman, she had vanished. Now I was running, blindly, desperately. My GPS wasn't working, my phone had no signal, and every direction looked the same. Trees, shadows, darkness. Then in the distance, a light. A soft, flickering light, like someone holding a flashlight. I ran toward it. But the closer I got, the weaker the light became, until it disappeared completely. And there I stood, face to face with a body. A young Japanese man, hanging from a tree. His face was darkened, lifeless. In his hand, a small note. "If you're reading this, turn back. This place is not..." I was lying at the edge of the forest. An old Japanese woman was leaning over me. She looked into my eyes and whispered, "You are lucky. She let you go. She doesn't let most people go." As I use in it. That was 6 months ago. I left that apartment, quit the job, returned to Pakistan. But still, in the dark of night, in my dreams, that forest calls to me. The woman, the silence, the eyes, they're still watching. Aokigahara isn't just a forest. It's a place where people get lost, and sometimes they lose their lives.